Okay, so you had the option of being married,
Yes.
but you're not.
Yes.
Why?
So a quick...
All the married people are like, well, I can see why.
So a quick thing just for the U.S., because some people might hear that and say, but you didn't have permit, you weren't able to do that. So in 1890 and then 1929, Rome issued documents that forbade the married priesthood in the United States. I'm generalizing here. Forbade the married priesthood in the United States only because it caused a scandal to the majority Roman Catholic population here. America was a melting pot unlike really anywhere else in history. So you all of a sudden had Roman Catholics and Byzantine Catholics that were usually separated by national boundaries. Now they're both interacting in the United States because of the immigration. And so many of the Latin hierarchs said, having married priests is scandalous to the Catholic population in the U.S., so they wrote to Rome, and Rome outlawed the married priesthood only in the U.S. and Canada.
Ooh.
Yes, and so...
And they married priests at the time?
Yes, so
what
they
happened?
almost always became Orthodox, almost every single one of them.
What was their option?
The option proposed by Rome was to go home, to go back, yeah.
That's gotta be a slap in the
even
face.
send your wife home, and you stay here. I mean, pretty much was, if you want to serve in the U.S., your wife needs to go. Yeah, I mean, it was so
That's brutal.
Yeah, it was brutal, and so and it was an absolute severing of our authentic ancient tradition. So I mean, it was not only like a human thing; it was you are attacking one of the greatest foundations of our church, namely that we've had for hundreds and hundreds of years. So many became Orthodox, some went home, some just disobeyed.
Golly.
So what happened was we spent over 100 years. Technically, if we're being obedient, only ordaining celibate priests, our Byzantine Catholic bishops. So,
Interesting.
So that changed under Pope Francis.
Interesting. That's very recent.
Very recent.
So
Pope
when
Francis,
you were ordained, it was still kind of outlawed,
right,
to
but-
get married and then be a priest.
So, but I knew well enough that the church was moving in that
coming down the
direction.
pike,
It was
yeah.
John Paul. He certainly wanted to change it. It was just figuring out how to do that. So it was coming down the pipeline. So, and my worst fear would have been, I get ordained celibate, kind of like, oh, poor me, I need to be celibate because the church asks for it. And then within a generation, all the guys are married. And I would have become so bitter if that had been the case. If I had been born 5 years later, I could have been a married priest. Yeah. And marriage is essential. I mean, marriage is such at the heart of a man's life. I didn't want to have to say it was just bad timing.
Right.
So I discerned that if God wills it, if I discern married priest, I'll be a married priest. So I had full confidence, and then I actually approached my bishop. I won't say who it was, but I approached my bishop and I said, Bishop, I was in seminary, I said, if I discern married priesthood, will you ordain me a married man? He says, I will not ordain you, but a bishop in Ukraine will. He says, I'll celebrate your wedding here.
But how would that look? If it wasn't allowed in the Roman Church, and you were saying, correct? It's not allowed, not the Roman
Right.
Church. So Rome didn't allow Byzantines to be married in America.
Correct.
And you're saying you were going to discern whether you could be a married priest.
Right.
How does that work? A Ukrainian ordains you.
So
and then
I'm
you're
allowed to be ordained a married man in Ukraine, and then I would come back here as a missionary priest to the U.S., which was outlawed in the early church. But by then there were many married priests serving in the U.S. that
when
were
you
just
say
from
you
Ukraine.
said early church, you mean in America? You don't. When you
Correct.
say-
I'm sorry.
Yeah. You say it was outlawed in the early church.
I'm
you
sorry.
mean
Yeah. It was outlawed. So married priests was only outlawed in North America.
Okay.
And so I would have gone to Ukraine where 99% of the priests were married priests, and I would have been ordained there and come here because there were already missionary priests who were married from Ukraine and Slovakia that were serving here, and the Roman Church was allowing them to. And almost every Roman bishop who 100 years ago thought it was a scandal, almost every Roman bishop was supportive of a married priesthood for Eastern Catholics, for Byzantine Catholics. So we could see the tide changing. So I knew this. So I fell in love my third year of college.
Okay.
And that was actually a push. So even though I had converted to the Byzantine Catholic Church when I was a teenager, when I went to Steubenville, most of my friends were Roman Catholic. I was part of the Roman Catholic pre-theology program. And so we talked about celibacy daily. Like this was the big issue. We all wanted to be priests, but celibacy was the big issue. So it was like, we were like 12-year-old girls talking about our weddings. We're sitting in our dorm rooms and we're saying, oh, the glories of celibacy and, and the glories of the priest. And I needed that conversation to help me discern, to see the beauty of it. But when I fell in love, I said, I now am moving towards being a married priest. So that's when I started asking these questions, and not of my bishop yet, but just asking the questions of, so that's one of the reasons why I switched from even considering being a Roman Catholic priest along with my friends, just for their fraternity, to saying,
interesting.
if I want to be married, I need to be Byzantine.
But you were a Byzantine Catholic at the time.
I was not canonically Byzantine. I had been attending Byzantine parishes for years.
So you could have become a Roman priest, because you'd never left. Okay.
But I had been practicing Byzantine Catholicism long enough where I knew I could switch rights pretty easily, and that it'd be accepted. Yeah. So that was the subtleties of my personal life.
You fall in love with this woman, you're dating her.
Fall in love with a woman. Right. Well, it was the weirdest thing because I was a pre-theologian, so I actually was not allowed to date. So it's one of those little rebellious things. So there was a pre-theology program at University of Steubenville that meant, but if you were part of the program, you could not date seriously.
Why? Was this because it was leading to priesthood?
Exactly. Oh. So it was a formation program for seminary. Totally understandable. So my coordinator kind of looked the other way with my hanging out with this girl all the time because he knew I was Byzantine. And they didn't want to change the rules of the pre-theology program. They didn't want to put something official saying, since he's Byzantine or most likely going to become canonically Byzantine, therefore we'll let him date. So instead of that, they just kind of kept a blind eye to my 2-hour-long phone conversations in the room and, being
hang up.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah. So this happened and I fell in love, and it was in this context where then I took it to prayer, as you should, and I said, and because I had insecurity, my first couple of years, last few years of high school, first few years of college, I had a great insecurity. And if someone had asked me, in all honesty, Michael, would a good Catholic woman fall in love with you? I think I would have said, I don't think so.
Father, I'm with you. That was me too.
And so I think many men have that insecurity. So I said, I don't think so. So I dated secular girls who were just all about the fun. It wasn't anything about we're leading to Christ, leading to a sacrament. But having this amazing Catholic girl spend time with me, I all of a sudden, I see what God said is he says, I am teaching you that you now have the freedom to understand that you'd be happy as a married man, and also you'd be happy as a celibate. And that's an immense moment of freedom to say, please. Can
I share with you, sort of my own experience, because it lines up with yours, and I think we could bring out something good from this. I became seriously Catholic when I was 17, had a reversion to the faith. And from that point on, I was discerning the priesthood just because it felt like the most kind of...
Catholic thing to do.
Yeah, that was a radical thing I could do, like to convince all my friends and family I was serious about this. But I didn't realize that my desire for the priesthood came out of a fear that I would be a bad husband, a lousy father, a bad lover, a bad provider. Like I had this deep insecurity that I'm not really acceptable, that no woman would want me. And I started, liking Cameron. And I had this thought, like, gosh, if I just become like a Franciscan friar of the renewal, she can observe me from a distance and respect how holy and pious I am. Yeah. But bloody hell, when we're dating, she knows when I'm grumpy, selfish, horny, angry. She sees all that, and that's terrifying.
Yeah.
And so it was through spiritual direction that I realized that my desire for the priesthood came out of this terrifying fear that I just didn't have what it took. Yeah. And obviously you don't want to become a priest or become a married man because you think you don't have what it takes for the other one. But that sounds like there was something similar there, right?
It was, and I think that's just a point of maturity that every man needs to go through to say, and that's why I use the word freedom. It's an immense freedom to say, I have the freedom to listen now. Because I have the freedom to be open to whatever God's calling me to, because I would not have listened to his call to marriage because I would have said, no, you're wrong. Like I could not have a good marriage. And it was mostly, I wanted to be married. I certainly did. I wanted to be a biological father. I did. But I didn't think that was an option to me because of my insecurities.
Was this subtle to you? Like for me, it was in the background. I wouldn't have acknowledged it. I would have went, no, I think I'd be a good, was that like?
It was subtle. I wouldn't have said that to anybody. And I think even looking back now, and I had an experience in seminary where I was chatting with 2 other seminarians and I said something about, the similarities between celibate fatherhood in a parish and biological fatherhood. And they said, do you really think you'd make a good father? Like biological father? And I was like, yeah. I think I would actually. And to them I said, would you? And they're like, that's why we're here.
No. They
and I was
didn't
like, yeah.
say that.
One had major commitment issues, and I mean, they just knew themselves, and they knew they had these deeper issues. And I thought, you guys need to leave.
Acknowledging that isn't a good thing, right?
I wanted to say you need to leave seminary. You need to go get some counseling and therapy. You need to find
Once
the
you'd
freedom.
be a good father and a husband, then you come back.
Exactly, because that's what's going to make you a good priest and pastor as well. It's really the same virtues, the same disposition, the same way of functioning and sacrificing and loving and giving of yourself, I think, in both worlds. So I had that insecurity, and then so these amazing women taught me that I was lovable by a good Catholic woman. Again, it was subtle, but I understood that. So then I had that freedom. So kind of the big moment came where I wanted to actually ask this. I mean, we knew each other so well, but I wanted to say, you know what? Let's go on a date and call it a date. Let's say to the world, look, that we're not just this pre-theologian and this girl who are scandalously hanging out together. I said, let's kind of show it to the world. So I without going to the whole story, but I pretty much told Jesus in prayer, I was like, Lord, tell me to do this, like support me. And I got nothing. And I was like, Lord, like just give me one little hint. I want to do it. I think she'll say yes. I wasn't even anxious about it because I figured she'd say yes. I had the place planned. I was like, my whole life's going to change. This is going to be amazing. And I said there, I was getting nothing from him. So then I said, okay, Lord, then you're going to have to stop me. Because our Lord works that way too.
Throw up a door,
exactly.
Lord.
I'm going to do it, but you're going to have to stop me. And so I'm walking to go ask her, and I'm completely expecting something big. I'm expecting our Lord to open up a chasm or a linebacker to hit me or something just extreme. Yeah. And I got all the way to her door, and I just could not knock. I wanted to with everything in me, but I said there's something. I now have this anxiety that is not a human anxiety. There was no human anxiety. It was a divine anxiety that came from saying, this is the chasm, but without being a chasm. Our Lord has said, I'm giving you the eyes of faith to see something subtle, and it is a little faith anxiety that I'm giving you, that I'm directing you in a different direction. So I didn't knock. I went right back to the chapel, and I said, Lord, like that was so odd. That was what I did not expect. I did not expect to be the one to not do it, even though there wasn't anything obvious. I could have made the excuse. I'm like, that little anxiety there, whatever. I want to do this, but I didn't. Thank God, I listened. So I went back to the chapel and I said, I am going to pray until I feel more peaceful about this. So what our Lord kind of directed me in was this sense of imagination, which the Eastern Church kind of poo-poos, but I used it, and it was beautiful. And I said, okay, I'm going to imagine being married. And I just imagined sitting in a nice room with a fireplace, 6 little kids running around, my beautiful wife sitting there in the chair, us having this deep discussion. And I thought, this is heaven. This is heaven. And then I had this very surface peace, but there was something down deep, inexplicable, that I said, what is that? So I said, okay, now let me consider celibacy. So I switched, I thought of this dark, cold house with gray walls and nobody else living there. I imagined walking in after a hard day and there's nothing.
No lights on.
No human beings.
Yeah.
I want to talk to someone. I need a little bit of love. I need a little consolation. There's nobody there. There's nobody there. Here I am alone in the world. And this is the imagination. I went in there, and then I had this complete surface anxiety. But then I was like, what do you do? And I says, well, I'm going to go find my icon corner, and I'm going to stand, and I'm going to start crying. And I was like, and I'm going to stand before Christ. And I stood there, and I was like, Lord, you have to give me something. Like, you cannot call me to this life without giving me peace. Like, you cannot take away my wife and my kids. You cannot do that without fulfilling me somehow. That would be unjust. And I know you're not an unjust God. And I stood there praying, and like all of a sudden this deep, deep peace, like even in the midst of the surface anxiety, this deep, deep peace came in there. And Jesus just said, I am everything. Like, I will be your everything, like unmediated love. And all of a sudden I had this rebellious kind of attitude of, you know what? I don't want to be normal. I don't want to have the consolation from a wife and kids. I want to actually say, I am living a radical life. And this came over time too, a radical life where if I don't depend upon Christ, I'm going to fall. I'm going to leave the priesthood. I'm going to turn to drugs. I'm going to become homeless. I'm going to die on the street if I don't cling to Christ for everything. And that became so attractive to me. No safety net. Christ is the only safety net. And having that and saying that is such a contradiction to the evils of this world. And I want to live those contradictions. Like I want to be a sign of the kingdom of God rather than the kingdom of the world in the most obvious way possible. And I began to learn that was celibacy. It was a way of saying, you are not normal. You are not natural. What you're doing is not normal or natural. It is supernatural. And I desired that little sign, if you will, that little eunuch for the kingdom, if you will, of something more. And with that was an ideal pious thought. And I have absolutely found now in my life why my celibacy serves the world. Because I love going out into the world and talking to people. And one of the ways that works is that somebody will say, like, for instance, how can I be same-sex attracted and not act on it? Like, if I'm attracted to another man or to another woman, like it's natural to act on that. And I go, look at me. I can speak from firsthand experience. I'm attracted to women. I desire marriage. I desire children. I desire to have sex with a woman. And I don't do it. I don't. And so it is entirely possible. And look at me. You know me. I'm a happy, joy-filled guy. And I do not have to act on all my impulses. And so it's this conviction for them to say, just because he's doing it, maybe I can be attracted to those of the same sex and actually not act on it, not have a sexual relationship, have a disinterested friendship, as the Catechism says. Maybe that is possible. And I've seen those little witnesses of my celibacy. And I've also seen that I actually went through it the right way. I discerned it properly so that I can say, for instance, I knew that my insecurity, if God had not healed me of that insecurity, I would have been ordained a priest having no good Catholic women attracted to me. But when I was ordained, here they come. Then all of a sudden I get a good Catholic woman showing me an attraction in a way that I never experienced. And I think I would have been powerless.
This happened to you?
No, it didn't. I mean, it happened.
It could have, theoretically.
I mean, I think every celibate man has priests, has women flirting with them. I mean, it's
well, you also have women come into invulnerable situations,
exactly.
sharing their sins with you having to comfort them in some respect.
And I call it flirtation, and it's not. Yeah. They're just being human, But there's that attraction that maybe if I had never felt it, I would have seen what was not flirtation as flirtation. I would have seen what was not attraction as attraction, and that could have pulled me out of my celibacy because I had never had to tell myself no. When I broke up with this girl or we just stopped hanging out, and when I had to then tell in other situations had to tell myself I'm attracted to her, do not do anything about it. And I had that repeated experience of saying I'm attracted to her, don't do anything about it. Whereas now as a priest for 15 years, I can say, if I'm attracted to a woman or I fall in love with a woman, which happens, I can say, yeah, I'm in love with her. Don't do anything about it. Keep it where it is. Love on her through prayer and through sacrifice, but don't follow those urges because it's going to lead you and her and the church and the kingdom of God astray. And so this is where fasting comes in. We need small examples of sacrifice. We need small examples of saying no to myself. If we have enough of that experience, then we'll be able to better say no to the bigger things when they happen.
I am just so honored by your honesty and humility and sharing all of that. I think one of the things Catholics wish of chastity speakers is that they just be more real. You know what I mean? You have this... People want to present a front of, but they don't share with what they're really struggling with, or marriages. They don't talk about how bloody difficult it is. Yeah. And so I'm just so honored that you would share that.
Thank you.
Hey, if you enjoyed that clip, you will absolutely love the full interview, so click right there to enjoy the whole thing. Also, a big thanks to these groups who made that interview possible. Learn more in the show notes below about these guys. They're absolutely incredible and honored to have them as sponsors. Oh, and also, if you haven't subscribed yet, click subscribe and then that bell button. That way YouTube will be forced to let you know when we put out more content.